All right, let's get right into it. This is the difference between show muscle and go muscle and how you can effectively build both. Now, to start this presentation, I'm going to pose a question. Is all muscle equal? Ask yourself, why are there some gym bros, despite having some muscle and hitting the gym for years, physically useless, and why some of the best athletes are people who don't even look that jacked? Right, there's this popular phrase out there, there's show muscle and there's go muscle, right? Show muscle referring to that purely aesthetic muscle, and go muscle being actual functional muscle that you can apply in the real world. Is there such a thing as quote unquote show muscle and go muscle, or is it just some catchy phrase, some myth? I will tell you from my 7 years in the fitness industry, right, strength and conditioning coach, working with many people, many athletes, there is a big difference between show muscle and go muscle. And I think an example that really paints this picture of these two different types of muscle is this TV show. It's pretty recent. It's called Physical Asia. Basically, in this TV show, they had different countries, different athletes from different disciplines competing in these challenges. And I know it's a reality TV show and, the challenges might not really hold any weight. But it was interesting to see there was a couple bodybuilders on the show, right? A couple of the teams had a lot of guys with a lot of muscle mass. And these guys weren't necessarily the strongest. Even in the strength-related challenges, a lot of them performed worse than, average built people. And, I think this show really paints that picture of the difference between show muscle and go muscle. Now, we all know show muscle to be only for appearance, but go muscle is a very generic term. What does it mean exactly? How do we develop muscle that actually aids in our ability to be capable and actually sets us apart from the average human, not just in looks, but in capability? Now, before I get into the breakdown, I just want to go over how I came across this difference in my own individual fitness journey. So when I first started here, I was just someone that really wanted to get into shape. I was very unhealthy. I had poor mental health. I just wanted an increase in confidence. So what did I do as an average young man getting into fitness? I got into bodybuilding training with my college roommate. And, I trained in a very bodybuilding type style. It was a lot of isolation movements, a lot of seated machines. And, I did find results in that. I gained about 15 to 20 pounds, most of it being muscle. But I remember there was a point in my journey when I felt like something was still missing because I wasn't as capable as I knew I could be. I knew that a lot of my strength was only applicable in the gym. I knew that, I wasn't really becoming a more capable individual. I was just trying to gain all of this empty muscle. So that's when my training took a turn and I really focused on strength, capability, movement, and I even took on a lot of different disciplines. I kind of widened my approach, and that really ties into my fitness philosophy right now, which is mainly focused on strength and capability. And what I found is when I shifted my focus into this, I became more aesthetic and got quote unquote more show muscle as a byproduct as well. And when it comes to the topic of gaining functional muscle, that go muscle, there's really two schools of thought, two sides, and most people fall under one of these categories because most people in the fitness space are followers, right? And so just for fun here, I'm just going to give them two funny names. We got the movement charlatans and the performative meatheads. Each of these two philosophies, each of these two groups has their own philosophy on getting to functional muscle or having muscle that can actually be applied in real life. They each have their own philosophies. So first we have the movement charlatans, and these guys promote this idea of, functional go muscle. And their training style is, they train fascia. They train these full body, movements with the emphasis on activating all this small musculature, all this coordination, right? Mobility, proper movement, mechanics, rotation. And usually these guys have very niche methodologies of training. If you guys look at the clips of these guys training, it's very niche. It's very unorthodox. And, they focus on topics such as myofascial slings, proper intermuscular activation, cross-body stabilization, all these, fancy movement terms. And, these guys get a lot of hate from the internet because I feel like it's because they kind of act like they're more superior to other training styles. But I do think a lot of the hate is undeserved especially when it comes to their training methodology, because what they do say holds a little bit of validity, right? There is such a thing as fascia. There is such a thing as quote unquote functional strength, although it's subject to interpretation. These things are real things. And our muscles do not act in isolation. They need to be able to work together through intricate sling systems. A lot of what these guys preach. But the problem with these guys' type of training is, like, if you look at these guys, they only focus on like functional movement mechanics. And they believe this to be enough. They believe this to be able to make them athletic, make them strong, and make them, athletically superior to a lot of different groups of people. In other words, they have the means for movement and mobility. They can activate all their muscles in the right way, but they lack the pure force and oomph behind their movement. If they were a car, they'd have all their parts in place. The alignment is perfect, but they simply just have no horsepower. On the other side of the spectrum, we got the performative meatheads. And I call them performative because it's almost like they take pride in saying like these overgeneralized statements that reflect simplicity like a meathead. They proudly champion their meathead status by giving the most dumbed down solution. And for example, like these guys will say stuff like, oh, just pick stuff up, put it back down. Pick heavy things up. It's that simple. They'll say things like, muscle is just muscle. There's no such thing as functional training, and you should just focus on getting jacked and strong in the compound movements, in the gym movements. These guys dumb it down and just basically say, just get jacked and strong, and everything else will fall in line. They believe all the niche and specific movements that the movement charlatans do. They think they're a big waste of time, and they think they're bullshit, and they think that it's a scam. These guys train hard to failure, focus on muscular development, and believe that strength, athleticism will all inherently go up when muscle mass goes up. Like the former, there's some truth to these guys as well. All things considered, gaining more muscle will improve things like athleticism and strength, and a lot of times for most people, the most functional thing you can do at the beginning is just to gain more muscle. These guys primarily care about effort and strength. They stick to a few tried and true gym movements, which are mostly on machines, don't really require much stability. The only movements they really do are pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging, etc. These guys are very strong, but they're very tight. Most of the movements they do don't really prioritize diverse ranges of motion. They don't really put emphasis on things like rotation, right? Cross-body mechanics, learning how to better intermuscularly coordinate, because these things don't really provide stimulus. And these guys only care about stimulus. In other words, they have the raw strength, size, and durability, right? They're jacked, but lack everything else in between, like movement quality, movement vocabulary, mobility, intermuscular coordination. If these guys were a car, they'd have a strong motor, strong horsepower, right? But the alignment is off and the parts are all over the place. My point is, people usually fall into one of these camps, when in reality, both have valid truths. And true Go muscle, as I'm referring to this video, is found at the center of these two perspectives. Go muscle is when you have both. Good versatile movement, the ability of the whole body to work together and be in sync, like a lot of these movement guys train, while being jacked, durable, and having the sheer strength and nervous system to power it, like a lot of these meatheads train. So you need both. You need to train in movement and train in meathead, both equal parts. And what I found is oftentimes focusing on this approach where you prioritize your movement and prioritize just training like a meathead, this will make you look pretty damn good as well, resulting in quote unquote show muscle as a byproduct. So how do we train at the intersection of these two perspectives? What is the methodology of training that will allow us to reap the benefits of both sides so we can not only develop Go muscle, but show muscle as well? So firstly, you want to prioritize a specific type of muscle. Now, not all muscle is equal, both in terms of performance, function, and longevity. And if you want a dense, athletic, and long-term physique, you want to be sure that you're prioritizing a specific type of muscle. Now, it's not as simple as more muscle mass equals stronger, right? Person A can gain 15 pounds, person B can gain 15 pounds, but there can be big differences in strength, right? This is because muscle mass differs in terms of quality, function, and longevity. So there's two types of hypertrophy that you need to recognize. Now, this right here is a muscle fiber. So when it comes to hypertrophy, there's sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and myofibrillar hypertrophy. And this really never gets talked about enough, and I really don't understand why. So let me break it down for you. This is a muscle fiber, and basically hypertrophy basically means your muscle getting bigger. And there's two main ways that your muscle can get bigger. So starting off with sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, you're going to see within the muscle fiber here, there's multiple parts, okay? We got these things called myofibrils, which are kind of like these stick-like things. These are the things that actually contract and generate force. In between the space, we have the sarcoplasm, okay? So you can kind of guess by the name, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. This is when your muscle fiber grows, and it's driven by an increase in the volume of the sarcoplasm. So it's basically a hypertrophy of the things outside the sticks. Your muscle gets bigger, hence hypertrophy happens, because it has the capacity to store more energy and fluid and water, not because the muscle fibers themselves get stronger. So this whole muscle fiber can increase if this sarcoplasm right here increases in volume. Basically, when the sarcoplasm volume increases, you have more of a capacity to store water, glycogen, other substrates. Now, myofibrillar hypertrophy, on the other hand, is the hypertrophy of these sticks, of the myofibrils, hence the name myofibrillar hypertrophy. This is the hypertrophy of the contractile elements of muscle, the things that actually contract. So basically, the bigger these myofibrils get, the more they can contract and the more stronger you will be. These things actually aid in your force production and actually carry some function behind it. So going into some more detail on each type of hypertrophy, we're going to first start with sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. This basically, you can think of it as pump training. Okay, this is best done at shortened ranges of motion that prioritize the contraction because this is more optimal for the pump. If you guys see a lot of these puffy bodybuilders train, they do a bunch of these little half reps because in that position, you're optimizing and you're making it easier for the muscle to stay under tension and contract and get a fuller pump. Think lighter, slower, focusing on time under tension, which drives blood flow and fluids to the muscle. This is how you develop hypertrophy of the sarcoplasm. Now, going into some more depth on myofibrillar hypertrophy, remember this is hypertrophy of the myofibrils, the things that actually contract and generate force. Now, this type of hypertrophy is best trained through load and a high degree of mechanical tension. Now, the best way to do this is practice full range of motion training at high to moderate loads. Now, we're not talking about light weights focused on the pump like sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. This is more about pushing moderate to high loads at full ranges of motion, really focusing on that stretch and contracting hard. What I've also found is this type of stimulus gives a more even adaptation throughout the whole muscle. What I mean by that, I see a lot of people, they look kind of clunky, they look kind of bunched up, they look puffy. Right? And this is because they focus on the contraction so much. They focus on these shortened ranges of motion. And when you do that, when you prioritize the contraction, you prioritize the peak of a muscle, the muscle belly, the center of the muscle. And that's why a lot of these guys, the center is more developed than the whole muscle as a whole, right? When you go to a full depth, you train the entire muscle from the midpoint, from the muscle belly to the attachment site. Also, going into full ranges of motion with moderate to high loads is going to favorably develop the connective tissue, right? Not just the muscle. All the things around the muscle and at the ends of muscle. I'm talking about your ligaments, your tendons, your joints. These things support durability, force generation, and real life applicability. Now, myofibrillar hypertrophy does not happen as fast as sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, but it will look better, carry more function, and last a lot longer since it's actually tied with strength. Prioritize this and take the long route because it will last in the long run. Now, this is the difference between people who just have empty show muscle and people who have real world go muscle. It's a myofibrillar hypertrophy focus. This is the actual type of muscle gain that will give you that go muscle. because it gives you muscle that can actually be used for strength and also adapts the rest of your connective tissue concurrently, something that cannot be said for sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So what do you actually implement to start training for myofibrillar hypertrophy? First, you want to choose exercises that can be loaded easily, heavily, and predictably. So do the exercises where you can pretty easily put more weight, right? Myofibrillar hypertrophy is trained by load, so you want to be able to manipulate that as easy as possible. You want to choose exercises that travel through a notable range of motion, right? You don't have to go to crazy ranges of motion, but make sure you're not doing things like rack pulls, for instance. You want to go through a significant range of motion to maximize that mechanical tension throughout the full muscle. And lastly, you want to perform sets of a challenging 5 to 10 reps generally for compound movements and around 6 to 12 reps for isolation exercises. And when I say these rep numbers, obviously it's at an intensity where 5 to 10 is challenging, right? Usually staying within that range is going to maximize for myofibrillar hypertrophy. Now, I think the biggest mistake a lot of men make that prevent them from achieving that myofibrillar hypertrophy is they overemphasize quote unquote feeling the muscle. And they think that the way to build muscle is to feel it more, which is probably the most dumbest thing I've ever heard. 7 years in the fitness industry, and I still don't know what that means. When people say, oh, I don't feel this, I feel that. Feel what? It's very generic. Do you feel the stretch? Do you feel the contraction? Do you not feel the stretch? Do you, right? Like, what are you talking about when you say you feel it? A lot of times, trying to feel something will make you do an exercise with light weight, high reps, and never give your body that mechanical tension stimulus to develop myofibrillar hypertrophy. And you will end up just emphasizing sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and end up with just empty show muscle. Sure, it's important to feel your muscle, but it's honestly not that relevant in terms of myofibrillar hypertrophy and creating that adaptation. The most relevant thing in building go muscle is stress and mechanical tension. And I want you to look at these two pictures here. Do you think the guy on his right, this is some jacked Olympic wrestler, do you think he tries to feel his back? Or do you think he just puts effort into what he does and just trains his sport with all his effort and all his might, and he ends up looking like this? Do you think he tries to feel his back? No. He just does what he can with 100% effort. Prioritize effort, prioritize mechanical tension, prioritize full functional ranges of motion. Okay, so now you've built the physical foundation of myofibrillar muscle or go muscle. And to reiterate, building this will not only give you stronger connective tissue, more mature and dense muscle, but it will also make you stronger because the stronger your myofibrils are, the more you can contract, hence the stronger you are. But only building myofibrillar muscle is not enough. When we talk about go muscle, it's a lot more than just physical muscle. It's muscle that has qualities, being coordinated, mobile, reflexive, versatile, and many other things. Go muscle isn't only just a physical thing, but it's also a skill and quality that you possess. Go muscle is something that isn't only built, but taught. So these are the qualities you must learn and be taught for you to truly have that go muscle. Now we're first going to start talking about intermuscular coordination. Now this is a skill that many athletes have, but not many gym bros have. It's basically your ability to use your different muscles in conjunction with each other. At the most basic level, this is what allows you to coordinate different musculature in a compound movement. So when you're doing, you're going heavy in a movement like the front squat, right? Your core has to stabilize, your thoracic spine has to extend, your outer hip muscles all have to act as stabilizers for you to execute the movement. The competency of all these muscles working together is your intermuscular coordination. Now, pushing heavy at these free weight compound exercises, right, these barbell exercises, is one way to get better at intermuscular coordination because it's a free weight barbell exercise. Your body is just going to have to coordinate all these muscles by default. Rows, presses, lifts, squats, all these free weight movements where you have to stabilize. But these are just the tip of the iceberg. There are a multitude of movement patterns that require different intermuscular reactions like rotation, stabilizing cross-body, and more complex unilateral movements. Sure, these things aren't going to be the most optimal because there's a stability aspect, right? You don't get a focus on purely just stretching and contracting the muscle. But in terms of developing intermuscular coordination, these things are going to be unmatched. Now, keep in mind, there's a different type of intermuscular coordination that goes on between just your regular resistance training exercises and your more explosive and dynamic movements. It's another skill completely to coordinate different musculature during these explosive and reflex movements. This is because these explosive movements don't operate in the same way as traditional resistance training exercises, right? Regular weight training exercises are done at a moderate tempo where you stretch, slow, pause, and contract. Explosive movements involve a rapid stretch and contraction, much like a rubber band stretching and flinging. And when you're doing explosive and dynamic movements properly, you're using this thing called the stretch reflex or the stretch shortening cycle. And this is a skill all by itself. Now, beginners can't do this rapid stretch to explosive movement transition well because it's a muscular function that must be trained. Think of movements like plyometrics, where you have to jump, cut, then immediately land into another jump and cut. The reflexive nature from landing to exploding again, right? Producing force, absorbing force, then immediately rebounding again. This takes a lot of intermuscular coordination and a lot of work on reflex. Right, here's another example. Think of Olympic weightlifting. You propel a barbell off the floor and you go into full extension. Then immediately you have to reorganize your body to catch the barbell and brace. The milliseconds that this movement happens in, right? This is all intermuscular coordination, right? Think about sprinting. Your muscles have to fire in conjunction and, some muscles have to contract, some muscles have to relax to take these efficient strides. Think about the complexity of all these micro adjustments in real time. This is all intermuscular coordination. So the second skill you must learn is just simply having a more diverse movement profile. Literally working on movement and training it as a skill. And you want to be doing this in addition to your general gym movements and just strength training and building muscle if you truly want to have go muscle, because your movement capability is the thing that's actually expressing all of the strength. If you have a lot of strength, a lot of muscle, but low movement, capability, that's essentially equivalent to you having all this money but having no way to actually access it or spend it. Now, movement is a very generic term, so I'm going to break it up into a couple different subtopics. But the first way to actually just develop a better movement profile is simply training at more diverse ranges of motion. Now, traditional gym movements operate within a standard range of motion, right? Most people don't go down that deep in a squat. They don't go down that deep in a press, right? And that's fine for just building decent muscle and just staying healthy, but it's only the baseline, right? If you want to move beyond average, you have to take it a step further, okay? You should be capable of expressing strength through full range of motion and be comfortable and competent in every range your joints can access, right? Not everything in life is going to happen in optimal joint angles. There's going to be plenty of times where you need to generate force from compromised or inefficient positions, right? And for example, I know a lot of people that can squat a lot of weight, right? When they're, going to a standard depth. But when they go all the way down, or maybe they're doing a lateral lunge and they drop all the way down, they literally fall on their butt because they're really good at that top range of motion, but they aren't so good in that bottom range, or, they can't really operate when they're under a full stretch. So you want to make sure that, your range of motion capabilities are fairly evened out. So how do we actually implement to train in this way? First, don't just train in one setting of range of motion. Add some variation that emphasize the different ranges of each joint. So don't just squat to the same depth. You want to be doing squat variations where you focus on that top portion and where you focus on that bottom portion. Do a bunch of variations of each exercise, right? When you're pressing, right, you want to do presses. Maybe if you're doing overhead presses, you want to do presses where you're going all the way down, touching that barbell on your upper chest and going back up. But then you also want to do variations where you start maybe halfway and focus more on that mid-range. Basically, just do more variations that emphasize different portions of the lift, different ranges of motion. You want to work in the short range, right, where that muscle is almost locked out and you're almost nearing contraction. You want to work in that long range where you're under a deep stretch. And also you want to throw in different exercises in there that aren't really common by regular gym standards, a little bit more unorthodox ranges where you're moving in these different ways that kind of variate the training from just your general gym movements. Another subtopic in movement is a focus on unilateral patterns. Now, these create versatility and a more diverse movement profile, right? This can be as simple as just lunges or more advanced, complex unilateral variations. Exploring this category of movement will make you more balanced between sides, more versatile, and a better mover overall. It's a very important tool in just developing different movement skills and developing balance throughout the body, which will result in more longevity. So how do we actually implement unilateral patterns? So each unilateral pattern will strengthen the working side and also the arrangement of the rest of the body to accommodate the unilateral pattern. Here are some of my favorites that I think people can just start adding right away. And even within these exercises, there's many variations where you can challenge your movement capabilities even further. So here are my favorites: single leg Romanian deadlifts, walking lunges, Bulgarian split squats or reverse lunges, single arm press variations, lateral lunges, one arm row variations, step up variations, right? And like I said, within all these exercises, there's different ways to hold the weight, different ways to simple things that you can do to challenge your movement capabilities even further. And the last subtopic of movement is doing more things in the transverse plane. Now, most gym movements occur in the sagittal plane, which means front to back. Think about your bench press, your back squat. Transverse plane movements are very underrated, right? These aren't the most quote-unquote optimal for building muscle, but they're very excellent accessory exercises that develop neglected musculature, right? Transverse plane movements often involve rotation. Now, rotation is a foundational human pattern that's essential for walking, running, throwing, punching. Yet, it's barely trained in gym culture. Now, these movements aren't the best for building muscle, but they are the best for full body integration and just learning the skill of smooth force transfer. And the truth is, most people cannot rotate properly. And because of that, they can't transfer force fluidly throughout their body and therefore don't really have go muscle. So how do we actually train for true rotation, and how do we implement this into our training? Now, this could be a whole nother topic on its own, and I might do this in the future. When I'm talking about true rotation, I'm not talking about, Russian twists. I'm talking about true ground-based rotation that teaches you how to transfer force from the lower body to the upper body throughout your full body, right? So first, there's a lot of different, exercises that you can do for rotation, but the same principles apply to each of these exercises. First, you want to start by planting the feet to the ground to generate force from the ground. You want to think about externally rotating your foot, activating your abductors and your glutes to allow you to plant and absorb force. As you push off the glutes, the adductors, and internal rotation of the foot is going to generate force. A lot of times you can pivot off the foot as well. And that force is going to transfer throughout the obliques and rotate the spine. Then the rotation continues through the obliques into the upper extremities to make one smooth movement. When most people rotate, right, if you guys see the average person do like a simple cable wood chopper, there is no lower body planting, no glute activation, and you need to learn how to integrate all these things to have true full body rotation. Now, you can start with your basic cable exercises to learn proper mechanics. From then, you can start incorporating more dynamic cable work, things like medicine ball throws, more heavier rotational variations, but it's important you just get that mechanic down at first. Then you can eventually take these skills into more advanced and more high velocity patterns like sprinting, throwing, and striking. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. If you really resonated with this video and you would like assistance in revamping your whole approach to prioritize for more of that go muscle, go ahead and book a call in the description. I'd love to chat on how we can implement this to your specific routine. Otherwise, I'm going to see you guys on the next one.